Defense News is proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, a special episode from the show floor of the annual meeting and exposition of the Association of the United States Army in Washington. We've got coverage of the latest headlines and insight from some of the Army's top leaders. Plus, how terrifying is a weapon that senses you through ground vibrations and then launches ammunition to take you out? We take a look at a suitcase-sized solution for stopping armored vehicles. Also, Army forces cannot, quote, expect to deploy without being challenged by a pure threat. A look at how the Army is heightening focus on contested logistics in the Pacific. And jamming, spoofing, and spying. Here's how the Army is looking to energize electronic warfare. Finally, a look at the combat capabilities that will go into making the Army of 2030. Join us for a special episode from the floor of the AUSA exposition here on Defense News Weekly. We've got those stories and more with the latest in news and analysis from the Pentagon to the platoon here on Defense News Weekly. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Andrea Scott. This week marked the annual meeting and exposition of the Association of the U.S. Army, or AUSA, conference in Washington, D.C. Right out of the gate, top leaders were out there talking about the future of the force. And first up, hitting enemies harder from farther away. Long-range hypersonic missile strikes are on the way. Army officials spoke about that and other topics at an opening panel at the event. Here's part of that conversation.
So the Army embarked on an effort to transform its force now roughly 5 years ago. So for each of the panelists, if you can talk about how your organization was transformed or created to ensure a successful modernization push. You know, obviously in the case of ASAL, which already existed, what are the changes that were made to ensure success, and for the RICTO and for AFC, those are new organizations, so talk a little bit about how they were formed and how they all work together.
Sure, Jen, thanks. So first of all, let me just say it is an exciting time for Army modernization. So as Mr. Hedger was noting, it's a big year. It's been a big year. It's going to be a bigger year in 23. So let me kind of set some stage there. So in 22, two programs that I think are emblematic of the new way we're trying to do things came along. So Next Generation Squad Weapon, from initial prototypes to getting ready to field in just 27 months, and Mobile Protected Firepower in just under 4 years, all the way to Milestone C. So those are early examples of the way we want to do things in the future. So coming in 23, an even bigger year. And the gentlemen beside me are going to have a big role in getting us there as well. First of all, long-range fires portfolio. We're going to hopefully, if things go well, there are risks, of course, but our goal is to field initial versions of the long-range hypersonic weapon, mid-range capability missile batteries, as well as the PRISM missile. So a huge increase in Army long-range fires with just those three programs. But also we have, of course, the down select for our FLRAA program coming. And we've got the next down select for our 3 prototype builds for OMFE. So, and a bunch of other programs as well. So it's going to be a busy 2023, but things are growing really well right now.
As these 24 and 23 come to fruition, we're really looking beyond that into 30 and 40 and how we're going to continue to outpace our adversaries, because everyone's going to school on the conflict in Ukraine. Everyone's watching very closely how the weapons are being effective, how the artillery is being used, how helicopters and fixed-wing assets, everyone's watching that. And as we try to transform, as we transform our Army We just have to be mindful that those 24 systems will need to outpace the future of China and the future of Russian systems. So it's not good enough to beat what they have today. You have to be mindful that they're going to upgrade, and your technologies and your assets have to be able to defeat whatever their modernization path takes them next.
And over on the show floor, we see a suitcase-sized solution for small dismounted units to fend off a tank advance. And that's not an anti-tank landmine you're thinking of. This isn't 1944. Picture an unassuming box, smaller than a travel carry-on, half buried in the dirt. It doesn't seem like much, but that little box can read ground vibrations that can tell if a tank or a light armored vehicle is approaching, and then launch the right munition to take it out. It's the Area Denial XM204, and we got a look at versions of one at AUSA. Todd South brings us more.
So the Army has a problem. As it looks to large-scale combat operations, it's going to be dealing with enemies with tanks, with trucks, with all kinds of vehicle systems that it didn't face in past wars. Well, a new system that's recently been adopted called the XM204 is essentially what they call a terrain-shaping obstacle. So what that means is that soldiers can implant these out in an area, and if any vehicle comes to them that's a threat, it can target and destroy that vehicle remotely, basically on its own, and be monitored in different ways that are safer than current existing platforms. Now you may think, well, this sounds a lot like a landmine or a minefield. It's quite a bit different. It's much smarter munition. It can recognize and identify targets with a variety of means, and it can attack them in different ways. And to help explain a little more detail on this, we're going to talk with Henry Finnerl. He's the Senior Vice President for Textron Systems Weapons. And Henry, can you tell us a little bit about XM204, what Textron's doing with this system?
Yeah, XM204 is really a new weapon system capability that gets right after those things you talked about that the legacy systems struggled with. So XM204 provides that capability that really is unique for the warfighter, in that when an enemy is approaching a certain avenue, it has the ability to stop them and fix them, and gives you the ability to control the maneuver space as opposed to the enemy being able to come and dictate their own paths.
So the system, you can't just program it to identify one kind of target. It looks at different ways of getting that information. How does the system determine what kind of target it's going to strike?
Yeah, it really is a smart munition. So it is put in the field by the soldier. The soldier places it and sets it up. It'll then listen and feel the ground and wait for enemies to approach it. It has acoustic and seismic. It also has a radar system on it. So as those enemies approach, it'll develop a target solution. Once it gets into the zone of authority for the system, it'll pop up one of its munitions, which is the airborne part of the system. It has 4 of them. These will go airborne and then search for the target in a growing pattern. Those have their own sensors on them, and those sensors will discriminate the targets and pick the right spot on the top to kill and defeat the target.
And it seems like it gives, like you talk about that area. So basically, you don't have an individual soldier just looking at one little roadway with one little system. You can have a soldier set up systems that covers wide swaths of an area for protection. Is that correct?
Absolutely. The soldier puts these out, and they do overwatch them to make sure that they are getting kind of the feedback of what's happening in that zone. So yes, the system can be put out, singly or in a mass with a number of them, and that feedback is critical so that they can determine what battle damage has happened and then see what has happened to the soldier. The other big part about overwatching the field is that they have the ability to let friendlies know not to come that way. They mark the field and ensure that it's a safe system for the soldiers for the Army and the Allies.
And so this isn't just a system that's, hey, we got the solution, we're going to field it out right tomorrow. There's a development process. Like, there's more things the Army wants to do with terrain shaping that go beyond this. This is kind of a starter package in a way. Am I understanding that correctly?
Right. U.S. Army Europe said they had an urgent need. They have an operational need for a system that can do this. So we got a fast-track program to mature this system. So this is XM204. It provides a building block for where the Army's vision for terrain shaping is going to go. So right now, this is a great capability. We got through development quickly, and it's heading towards production. We just got our first production program, and this will begin delivering in 2023. And the systems that they're going to add to it in the future, under the umbrella of close terrain shaping obstacles, will be things like bottom attack, make more of a complex, so you have top attack and bottom attack, have the ability to turn the system on, turn it off, allow friendlies to come through and then rearm it, recover the system. A number of new features and capabilities that are in the overall product roadmap for this system.
And this isn't just, there's a lot of science going behind this, all credit there, but also soldiers have touched this. Like soldiers at Yuma Proving Ground have actually tested this, worked with it, given some feedback from the combat engineer field. Is that correct?
Absolutely. This system has been thoroughly tested. We go through both Textron contractor level testing, and then we've delivered a number of these systems to the U.S. Army, who out in Yuma has continued to check it out, make sure that it's safe to operate, make sure that it can withstand any type of environments that it may see, and then prove that it still has the combat capability that the Army is looking for.
Thank you very much. So you have a suitcase-sized piece of equipment that can protect a wide area for soldiers in a much safer way than current systems, and it's going to be fielded soon. It's going to be to soldiers by next year, fiscal year 2023. This is Todd South with Army Times at AUSA.
Thanks, Todd. When we come back, a look at the Army's near-peer threats and how it plans to improve logistics in the Pacific. And then how the Army plans to energize electronic warfare. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Andrea Scott. Coming in 2023, the U.S. Army in the Pacific will ramp up efforts to examine how to conduct battlefield logistics in contested environments. Defense News reporter Jen Judson spoke to General Charles Flynn about the, quote, protracted fight that the Army is preparing for. Let's take a look.
I believe that this also featured a wet gap crossing side of the exercise. So can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, we hear a lot about the wet gap crossings in Europe, but this has got to be different. So, does the Army really at this point have what it needs for that? I mean, I know at least in Europe the bridging capability and that type of thing kind of took a back seat for a while, and the Army is looking.
Well, there's rivers everywhere,
There's lots of water where you are,
and there's a fair amount of water where we are, right? So what I would say is the joint forcible entry by air, fixed-wing air, by rotor-wing air, and by amphibious assault was in itself a form of a wet gap crossing where we had to really conduct a lot of the shaping operations at levels above the operational level. So I think the lesson from that was you really, in order to conduct multi-domain operations at multiple echelons, you really do have to have the enabling capabilities on the front end of doing an operation that complex. Secondly, in terms of bridging, yes, I mean, there's mountains and rivers where we are too. Korea has a number of bridges that they're going to need for their wet gap crossings, and they're practicing that all the time. Mm-hmm. I do think that in the warfighter, it's a command post exercise. So what's really important is the planning, synchronization, and coordination that has to go into that effort. Yes. And then the logistics, the fires, the maneuver, the protection, the sustainment capabilities that are needed to continue the momentum. And so we do learn what the requirements are for number of bridges, types of bridges, and then candidly what type of equipment we bring in there to navigate once we're on very compartmentalized and difficult terrain that has both restrictive terrain from large urban areas to mountains to rivers to jungle. And so I think that is really important for our staffs to understand before we actually put forces forward.
Thanks, Jen. Jamming, spoofing, and spying. The Army is looking to air-to-ground platforms to more effectively wage electronic warfare. C4ISR Net reporter Colin Damarist spoke to Deputy Program Executive Officer for Intelligence, Electronic Warfare, and Sensors, Brigadier General Ed Barker, for more.
What I was explaining in the Warrior Corner is that in order to pivot into a multi-domain fight, we've got to be prepared to see much further. I think the way the Secretary put it yesterday was, we've got to be able to see more, we've got to be able to see further, and we need to see more accurately. And so it enables sort of our future operations for long-range fires. It enables our future operations for optionally manned vehicle, future vertical lift. All of the big modernization priorities sort of underpins our need to sense deep. Right, and it's also highlighting some of the lessons that we're learning out of Ukraine right now, right? That you can deliver effects that are not necessarily kinetic, and they can be devastating to how you want to operate. Just denying GPS could be a potentially very powerful thing in a coin or MDO environment, right? And so being resilient and understanding that the impacts that you have on your formation is very important to us. And so building sort of that diverse investment of resilient EW and a holistic EW portfolio, I think that's where we're really excited. And we're seeing some of the programs pan out, like I mentioned with APNT, but also with our terrestrial layer system, our MView Air Large, and our capability for echelons above brigade that you mentioned earlier.
So I'll pull the string a little bit on the biometrics one. And that's across the range of functions that enable the Army to do everything from day-to-day operations on a base or a post like Redstone versus identity intelligence in theater. It's something that was incredibly important coming out of theater as part of the Afghanistan withdrawal, being able to vet known persons to reduce any type of threat as they're maneuvering between areas of operations.
There have been a flurry of contracts coming from Yale's office recently. There was the $540 million MAPS Gen 2, the $18 million for 80's multi-domain sensing system. Is that pace going to slow down? Are you guys going to maintain that clip? Is there anything we should look forward to over the horizon?
Earlier in the year, I think, is what we want. That's one of the goals.
That's a great point. No, I don't think it's going to slow down. Certainly, ALE, we mentioned already, is a priority for us here in 23. We've got a TLS EAB competition ongoing. We're really excited about that. But no, I don't think it's going to slow down.
Yeah, I don't think we can, because if you look at the pace of the Army and how we're going, I mean, within our PEO, we're some of the really key enablers across all those, all the priorities, and so, and when you look at the timelines in which those are going to be delivered, I don't think we can take our foot off the pedal.
Thanks, Colin. Next up, our personal finance expert gives her latest tips. Welcome back. On this edition of Money Minute, Navy Federal Credit Union personal finance expert Jeanette Mack gives her latest tips on managing your money.
Millions of consumers use mobile banking, but there's also millions who don't. If you're in the latter category, are you worried you'd be putting your identity and your money at risk? Or maybe you haven't used it before and you just don't know how. Well, neither of these should be reasons to avoid using a service that can save you time and money. Two things you can never have enough of. It's about convenience and control. Never leave home to bank and always bank on your time. That's the beauty of mobile banking. Make deposits, transfer money to friends and family, and more. The app can even warn you when you spend more than you have, allowing easy transfers between your accounts to cover expenses. If you're nervous about the security of mobile banking, there's no need. Mobile banking is safer than ever, and they're set up to either use your fingerprint, Face ID, and use two-factor authentication to securely log in. Take your money matters into your own hands, literally. Use mobile banking to help you manage your money like a pro.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next time. To get more coverage of military and defense issues, head on over to Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps Times.com and DefenseNews.com for more stories. And if you want to outsmart your fellow troops with military news facts, sign up for our Early Bird Brief for top headlines in your inbox each weekday. And get the latest on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. And when we come back, part of our panel discussion on how to invest in the post-Ukraine era, brute force or emerging tech. A group of experts weighs in. The war in Ukraine has informed a lot on views on how to plan for a future fight. One top question, how do you invest in a post-Ukraine force? Focus on emerging tech or brute force? To talk through the topic, we gathered a panel of experts to look at how to best move an army forward.
I think over the past couple of decades, maybe we've forgotten what high-intensity conflict is really going to be like. It's, you know, it's unruly, it's unpredictable, it's going to spiral to violence, and it took us a while here to fully appreciate that, and I'm not sure everybody really has appreciated fully the impact of that on how we ought to train and look at the force.
Another issue, I think, which is similar to past wars, is the importance of logistics and the industrial base. We've discovered that, you know, we've done just-in-time deliveries, small unit orders, being very efficient, and modern war, if we're going to be effective, really requires mass. It may not require the mass of the same thing, so that we can argue that, but it's require mass, and that mass has to then be delivered. And so you not only have the problem of throughput on the sides, but also then creating a whole set of targets, these bases, the ammo depots, and all the rest. And we're seeing how both sides have gone after these logistics in order to influence the battlefield.
There are so many lessons learned. First of all, for logistics, investments in logistics are often subject to cuts because it's not the tooth.
Right.
But what we're seeing in this war is that the tail is the tooth. Logistics are critically important to success on the battlefield.
Right.
A second lesson is the importance of having adequate stocks of useful material like munitions. It's clear we need to have a really large inventory of munitions for any future conflict.
Yeah.
I would say also, I think we've got to start thinking in terms of munitions rather than platforms. As munitions get longer and longer range, the platform, you can be platform agnostic. If I'm hunting tanks from 90 kilometers with cheap drones, I don't need an armored vehicle to do this. I can take an Isuzu van. That's the other thing we're learning is if you're going to move, you're probably going to have to blend. Because the only way to survive in this environment, if they're equipped like the Ukrainians aren't hitting, is you can either blend in, like Where's Waldo, or you can get overhead cover. And again, the defense has an advantage. You get back into a building, dig a hole. But those are going to be two requirements that we have not practiced for a very long time.
The ability to surge needs to be understood as a war-fighting capability. So we think about it as, industry can surge if we give them the requirement or whatever, you know, and that puts the focus on the weapons that are delivered. It's that surge process that needs to be better understood and invested in.
From the industry perspective or from the government perspective? Both. I see. Go ahead.
One of the things you need to consider also is the rest of the supply chain. For example, article in the Wall Street Journal just today actually on restarting the 155 production line. And it's going to take years, in large part because of the difficulty getting a hold of the necessary titanium.
I'd like to turn back to the question of advanced technology and investments.
Okay.
A good amount of innovation does come from the government. It sets a requirement and pushes for, changes the tactical edge. But a lot of innovation also comes from industry, which the military can take terrific advantage of. The challenge is that they're at very different refresh rates. And when the military buys commercial technologies, it is a real challenge to make sure that it's keeping in touch with the latest and the greatest versus setting a requirement for something that might have been cutting edge 2 years ago.
Right.
So they're just two different cultures that need to be aligned to make sure that the Army can take advantage of new technology.
We're starting to realize that. I mean, you see us building equipment now that you can put, you can upgrade your technology inside of it, your software. The frame is made to be here for a long time, but the internals can be changed pretty quick. So I think we're beginning to understand it.
So the modular open systems.
The Army gets MOSA. The Army gets MOSA.
That's where most of us, that's where it's going.
What have we learned on the role of allies?
Absolutely necessary. That's how we fight. And, that's one of the Army's roles in the Pacific, by the way, is building that partnership and their capacity and access.
It is one of the United States' greatest assets. It's so important, and we've seen that in every step of this war.
we've had some remarkable behavior on the part of a lot of the allies in Europe, which needs to be sort of applauded. At the same time, let's recognize how tough some of this is. Getting the kind of changes, getting the kind of response, getting agreement, getting access.
That's right.
Moving equipment. The Germans, have sort of been on and off and on again. And so you have to be prepared to try and push, in a crisis, to try and push things at a much more rapid pace.
And that's all we have time for this week. Please visit us on militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more coverage. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.